Happy 2026, and welcome to episode 59 of The Cameron Brown Show. If I'm being completely honest, this is like my 10th take, and it's going to be my last because I'm not going to keep doing this over and over and over again. But this format's a little bit different for me, just looking at the camera and talking to the camera. I'm so used to asking questions and being able to communicate and talk to a guest on the other side of the screen or in person. So bear with me as we get to this episode tonight. If you like it, we'll do more of them. But regardless, I felt like this information should be discussed, and I also have a goal of getting out at least one podcast a week in 2026. So here's to making that goal a reality. I've been having a lot of conversations with individuals as of late around all the conflicts that are going on around the world, and we've discussed how difficult it is to keep up with all of the information that comes out of these places and that the media is sharing with us online, on TV, wherever you get your news, just an overload of information. And so it's really difficult to formulate a really solid opinion on some of these things when you really don't have all the information that you really want because you're being force-fed misinformation at every single angle. And so for me, what I've started to do is I've started to reach out to friends and people that know a lot about these particular topics and that live in these areas to gain a better understanding of what's really going on and to formulate a better opinion myself of each of these situations. So, for example, tonight's topic is around the conflict and, frankly, what seems to be now the downfall of the Iranian regime. And I'm not going to speak about it from my perspective because I've never lived there and I don't know what actually goes on within the borders of Iran except for what I hear from the media. And so I decided to reach out to a friend who actually lives there, experienced the 12-day conflict with Israel, and is now living through the protests and, frankly, what could be the downfall of the Iranian regime in the near future. We don't actually know the timeline of that. Nobody does, but it seems to be ramping up more and more and more. And so through multiple conversations, I just said, hey, can you just write up what's going on right now, write up what you're thinking, write up what you're feeling, and help me to explain to my listeners what's really going on in Iran and how the people feel about the situation in Iran. Now, obviously, this is not the opinion of every single Iranian, but it seems to be a pretty large consensus across the board that the people are fed up with what's going on. Once again, you can formulate your own opinion on that situation. But I wanted to share with you some of his words so that you can really dive deep into and better understand what's going on. I also want to just preface this by saying that we are obviously not releasing his information also. I did not write this. I promise I didn't write this. This is coming from an individual in Iran. And in order to protect that particular individual, we will simply be keeping their identity anonymous for now. And when the time is right, we will bring them forward so that they can get proper credit for everything that I will be reading today. So bear with me as I read through this. I just think this is very important information and look forward to sharing with you accordingly. The protests you see on your screens do not look like typical revolutions. They are not grand, cinematic, or centrally organized. There are no single leaders, no clear headquarters, no banners announcing a new dawn. Instead, there are tired faces, short chants, people who return home quickly, check their phones, and go back out again the next day. This is what exhaustion looks like when it turns into resolve. Iran today is not exploding. It is accumulating. Years of pressure, economic, psychological, morale have stacked on top of one another until even silence has become unbearable. What you are witnessing is not rage alone. It is grief mixed with clarity. A population that has done the math, looked around, and reached the same conclusion independently. The system has failed, and it cannot be reformed from within. To understand why, you have to understand what Iran should have been. This is a country sitting on some of the world's largest reserves of oil and natural gas. A nation with a young, educated population. Engineers, doctors, artists, mathematicians, many of whom compete globally despite being cut off from the world. Iran's geography alone could have made it a bridge between East and West, a hub of trade, energy, culture, and diplomacy. This is what the deposed Shah was building in the 1970s. When camels were on the streets of Dubai, the Concorde landed in Tehran. Its history, Persian, poetic, scientific, should have been a foundation for more modern confidence, not a relic to be suppressed. Instead, the country was handed to an ideology that fused the worst instincts of authoritarian religion with the economic incompetence of centralized control. What emerged was neither true socialism nor authentic faith, but a hybrid system that nationalized responsibility and privatized corruption. Islamic socialism, as practiced here, promised justice and equality. What it delivered was hierarchy and patronage. It claimed to protect the poor, yet created a permanent underclass dependent on subsidies, while a politically connected elite extracted wealth without accountability. It spoke of morality while institutionalizing hypocrisy. It declared resistance against the West while quietly sending the nation's future abroad, often through the very systems it condemned. Religion, once a deeply personal and cultural force, was turned into an enforcement mechanism. Faith became law, law became fear. Over time, belief stopped being spiritual and became transactional, comply or pay the price. This did not make society more moral. It made it more performative. People learned what to say, what not to say, how to disappear in plain sight. The gesture of saying yes and no with your head are the opposite in Iran than the West. A nod up means no, and a nod down means yes. As children, fathers teach their children that when the authorities ask a question, always nod upwards, imagining a knife being under your chin. If you say yes and nod downwards, you're stabbing yourself. Corruption filled the gaps. When ideology replaces competence, mismanagement becomes inevitable. Ministries are run by loyalty, not expertise. Mega projects are announced with fanfare and abandoned half-finished. Inflation is blamed on enemies, sanctions, or conspiracies, never on structural rot. Meanwhile, the same institutions that preach sacrifice funnel billions into opaque foundations, foreign militias, and security apparatuses designed to control the population rather than serve it. The average Iranian feels this every day. It is in the price of bread that doubles without warning, and rent that climbs while wages remain frozen, and the educated graduate driving a taxi, and the family that sells gold heirlooms to pay medical bills, and the quiet decision to not have children because the future seems too cruel to impose on them. This is not poverty caused by scarcity. It is poverty caused by choices. One of the most painful truths for Iranians is knowing that their suffering is not inevitable. It is engineered. The resources exist, the talent exists, the will exists, but what is missing is a system that allows value to circulate instead of being siphoned upward and outward, to fund ideology, regional adventurism, and performative defiance. For decades, the regime framed hostility towards the West as a moral stance. In practice, it became an excuse for isolation, stagnation, and repression. Cooperation was portrayed as surrender. Trade was framed as contamination. Engagement was recast as betrayal. Yet the price of this posture was not paid by those in power. It was paid by ordinary people through inflation, unemployment, isolation, and lost decades. Iranians do not dream of domination. They dream of normalcy. A passport that works, a currency that holds value, a future that does not require escape, a government that invests in schools instead of surveillance, infrastructure instead of intimidation, and opportunity instead of ideology. This is why the protests feel different now. They are not about a single grievance. They are not about a broken contract between state and society. People no longer argue policy. They argue legitimacy. The question is no longer can the system be fixed, but why should we continue pretending it represents us? What makes these protests heartwarming, despite the fear, arrests, and violence, is the quiet solidarity that runs beneath them. Small acts of courage, a shopkeeper closing early in support, a stranger offering water, a woman removing her headscarf not as a provocation, but as reclamation. These are not gestures of chaos, they are gestures of dignity. There is also a striking absence of illusion. Protesters are not romantic about the road ahead. They know change will be costly. They know power does not dissolve politely. But they also know something irreversible has happened. The spell is broken. Fear no longer monopolizes the public space. Silence is no longer assumed. From the outside, Iran is often reduced to headlines. Nuclear talks, sanctions, regional tensions. But from the inside, it is far more intimate. It is a country mourning the life it could have lived. a nation that sees clearly the distance between its potential and its reality. These protests are not anti-culture. They are not anti-identity. They are not even anti-faith. They are anti-extraction, anti-lies, anti-suffocation. They are a demand to stop wasting a civilization. If there is a message here for the world, it is this. Iranians are not asking to be saved. They are asking to be allowed to live normally, to trade, to build, to collaborate, to compete, to argue politics without risking prison, to believe or not without coercion, to stay. And if there is a message for those in power, it is simpler and far more dangerous. The people have already moved on. The chants are only the echo. History does not always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it comes quietly, carried by tired people who decide they are done being managed, disciplined, and spoken for. From Iran, this is what hope looks like now. Not loud, not naive, but stubborn, rational, and deeply human. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.